My name is Erin Colburn. I'm the Pre-Health Advising Coordinator for the College of Health Sciences at Boise State University. It's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ybarguren from the Idaho Dental Education Program at Idaho State University and Creighton University to share some information about this program, answer your questions, and I'll let him take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Can you guys all hear me okay? So let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. Let's see here. Okay, can you all see that?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay. First, before we go into much of that, and we may go through some of this or all of this, depending on what is best for you guys. Me meeting with you guys is a pleasure for me, and I'm here for you. So I can go through this PowerPoint if that is what, the best way to answer your questions. But having said that, we don't need to go through any of that, or I can go through just pieces of it to answer some of your questions. But if it's okay, well, let me do this. I'll share with me, each of you that are here, where you're at. I'm assuming we may have some students that aren't at Boise State. We allowed some to come in that are from other schools so thank you, Erin, for allowing us to do that. But Wyatt, why don't you start and maybe just share with me where you're at in the process, and like what year you are in school, and whether or not you're just kind of checking things out, or if you know for sure you want to apply to dental school, and just a little bit about yourself for me, if that's okay.
Well, Jeff, how's it going? Yeah, I'm Wyatt. I am a junior here at Boise State. I am currently a kinesiology major. I got my chem minor and I switched over this last semester. I'm in the process of studying for the DAT right now. So yes, I am getting ready to apply for dental school. One of the things that I'm going through currently is deciding if I want to apply this year or if I want to take a little bit of time, work on some stuff and apply next year. But I'm just checking out all of the different schools that are coming in and telling us about their programs, and yeah, that's pretty much what I got for you so far.
Cool, awesome. And where'd you grow up?
Oh, I grew up here my whole life. My family traveled pretty much everywhere. And then when I was born in Missouri, and then my dad got his second job here in Boise. He's an ER doctor, so he went around through different places. But I've grown up here since I was about 1 year old. So
cool, awesome.
I went to Eagle. Yeah, I went to Eagle High School, and then just came here and have been here ever since.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Thank you,
Courtney.
Cassidy. Yeah, oh, go ahead. What was that, Wyatt?
Oh, I said thank you.
You're welcome. Absolutely. Cassidy, why don't you go next? Tell me a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm a junior at Boise State. I am majoring in health science studies with an emphasis in biomedical chemistry. I actually want to be an oral surgeon and have known that I've wanted to do that since I was like 15, something like that. So I'm a dental assistant here in town and love it. It's great. I am originally from Montana. So I go to school here and I'm in the honors college program here, and it's great. But my uncle is a dentist and my mom is a dental hygienist. And the dentist that my mom works for currently is a Creighton alum. So Creighton is one of the programs that I've really been looking at. And a lot of the dentists back home, they went to Creighton. It's kind of like the popular thing to do. So it's one of my programs that I really am interested in looking at. I'm an Idaho resident now, and yeah, I'm excited to hear more.
Cool. Thank you. Let's see here. Courtney, how about you next?
Hi, I'm Courtney. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I go to Boise State right now. I grew up in Meridian, Idaho. My parents originally are from Idaho Falls and Emmett, sorry. And so I've been here most of my life, and I want to do oral surgery or endodontics. I'm really interested in specializing. And right now I'm studying chemistry and biochemistry, and I'm just in the pre-dental pathway and taking some extra classes so I can prepare myself for applying this year. So I'm studying for the DAT right now and getting all my materials ready. So that's me.
Cool, thank you.
And then Dr. Ybarguren, Owen doesn't have a microphone, but he is one of our Boise State graduate students, and he is currently working on a construction management major. So he's doing both his pre-dental coursework and construction management, and he'll likely be taking his DAT this summer, and he's originally from Meridian, Idaho.
Awesome. Cool. Well, what is it? And I just want to collect a bunch of things to begin with. I won't answer them at this point in time, but tell me, what is it? What are the things that you guys want to learn from today? And so you guys can just kind of take your turns and rattle them off, and then I will make sure that that we address all those things in today's. And then so I just want to make sure what you want to know, and then I'll make sure that we address them, and so that I'm not sharing stuff with you that you may already know and don't need to talk about. So what is it that you guys want to get from this?
So maybe you can either post in the chat some of your questions, or you can just take your mic off and share with us what questions you have about this program.
Hi. Oh, sorry, Courtney.
Go ahead,
You want to
Josie.
go? Okay.
Go ahead, Josie.
Okay. I didn't get to introduce myself, so just real quickly, my name's Josie. I have the privilege, I feel like, to be a part of this meeting. I'm from Lewiston, and I go to LCSU right now. So my advisor Jacob got a hold of us and let us know that this is an opportunity. I'd love to be a part of it. I'm graduating this spring, getting my bachelor in biology, and then I've been in dentistry for the last 6 years. I was an assistant. I've been a lead for the last 4 years, and then I've been traveling to help develop other offices for the past 3 years. So I've been in industry for quite a while. I think my biggest question is how to make your application stand out, and kind of what you guys look for in regards to really good applicants.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you for sharing, Josie.
Thanks,
Courtney, did you have a question that you would like to have answered today?
Yeah, I was just interested in like how the first 2 years compare at Idaho State to other schools that you would be going to for 4 years, and how the 2-year system like kind of introduces you to transitioning to Creighton and how that works.
Sure.
And it's just 1 year, Courtney.
Okay.
So 1 year at ISU, and he can go over that, but 3 years at Creighton.
Correct. Okay, other things you guys want to know?
Does Creighton have you basically into the intro, we kind of learned that Creighton really values this program because they see a big value in like rural areas and like rural parts. I just wanted to know a little bit more about what other things Creighton does in order to like push on that. Is this their only, like, is Idaho the only state that they work with? That type of thing.
Okay, that's actually a really great question. Thanks, Cassidy.
Other questions?
I'd kind of like to know what the experience is like in the program for the students, what kind of support they get while they're at the first year, and then what is it like to transition from the first year to the second, third, and fourth years.
Cool.
Okay, I joined a little bit late. I'm Carson Schwanevelt. I grew up in Twin Falls, and my grandpa and then my 2 uncles, they were all dentists, and my 2 uncles actually went through the IDEP program, and they loved it, and I've always been interested in going into this program and like looking into it. They just had great reviews about it, and they loved Creighton. And then one thing I'm interested in is like, how do students feel doing the 1 year at Idaho State? Are they feeling more prepared when they go into Creighton, and vice versa? Yeah.
Cool. Absolutely. All right, well, I think and feel free to chime in at any time, any of you. I think with everything that you guys are wanting to know, we'll probably go through a good chunk of this PowerPoint. We'll kind of scan over some things and I'll hit some other, like some bigger areas, and you guys can, like, we can slow down if you have questions about what we're talking about. And then at the end of that, I'm happy to answer questions at any time. So as we go through something, if something jogs a question, please feel free to just speak up and stop me, and we can talk about it at that time. Okay. Everybody probably is, it seems like all of you that that are here, it doesn't seem like any of you are really questioning whether or not you want to go to dental school or want to become a dentist or dental professional. It's more just wondering where you might go and the pros and cons of different schools and different programs. So because of that, I'm going to kind of skip over just, there's pros and there's cons to dentistry in general. And so we won't talk a lot about that, but I mean, you probably are very well familiar with the pros and cons of dentistry. One of the things I would say, and some of the things that we take very much into consideration, is that people have done, that applicants have done their homework in terms of really making sure they know what they're getting into. They've done a lot of shadowing hours. They've worked within the profession. They're familiar with what's really going on. Some of you have, like Josie, have worked for 6 years as an assistant. So, like in the insides and out of dentistry, you realize what are the stressful parts, and what, as opposed to an applicant whose neighbor's a dentist and they work 3.5 days a week and they golf every Friday and they drive a fancy car and take cool vacations. And so you go, well, I want to be a dentist. There's no question that dentistry provides lots of opportunities to make a good living, to be able to make an impact in people's lives, and to be able to have free time on top of that, to be able to spend time doing other things that you enjoy doing. But no amount of any of that. There's lots of ways to make a good living, and if that's the primary motivation, and yet someone would not love the day-to-day aspects of dentistry, then man, you'll hate it, and you'll be we're good at what we like, and we like what we're good at. And if we don't enjoy the things that we're doing, then we won't be really good at it. So anyway, so we take a lot of stock in making sure that people have good, high quality shadowing hours and experience within the profession, or experience within the profession, so that they really know what they're getting into. Because sometimes people know, like, dentistry is stressful. You're working in a dark, wet, movable hole that really is connected to someone who'd rather be somewhere else than laying in your chair having you provide dental treatment for them. Lots of times, there's times when I feel like patients feel like I'm doing something to them, not for them. And that can be hard, and it's stressful. And if you don't like that, and you can't, well, no one likes that. But if you can't deal with that along with all the other stuff, then I mean, it's a long day, and that makes for long weeks, which makes for a long career. So we want to make sure that you're familiar with all those things. So lots of pros and cons to dentistry. What's IDEP? Where Idaho does not have a brick and mortar dental school. We don't have a dental school in Idaho. And so the state of Idaho purchases 8 seats at Creighton University Dental School. And then the students that are accepted to IDEP take their first year at ISU and 3 years in Omaha. And the state of Idaho pays about 55% of the students' tuition. So students pay about, we'll get to this in a later slide, but students for next year, students are going to pay about $33,000 instead of $71,000 in tuition a year. So pretty big savings. And so it's kind of Idaho's state assisted route for dental education, similar to the WWAMI programs and the WICHE programs for medical school. So like the University of Washington or University of Utah programs for medical school. So similar to that. At ISU, we're part of the Department of Dental Sciences. So we have a dental residency program here at our campus in Pocatello. There's also a dental residency program at the campus, ISU's campus in Meridian. with 4 dental residents. So those are graduated dentists getting an advanced education in general dentistry. And then we have the 8 IDEP students are, go to their first year here with us in Pocatello. So here where I'm at, I'm in my office here in Pocatello. We have a dental residency program here where the 8 IDEP students kind of rub shoulders with the 4 residents that are providing dental treatment in a 1-year advanced education in general dentistry residency program. So it works out pretty well. Creighton, this is a picture of the new dental school. It's been there for a couple of years, about 4-ish years as of now. And they just recently, so this was just recently built, a brand new dental school. It's awesome. It's beautiful. It's huge. Creighton's a private school. It's a private Jesuit school. So similar to Gonzaga or Notre Dame or other Jesuit schools. Private schools have some perks to them. Like, I don't know how it is at Boise State, or LCSC, but, sometimes the facilities in a state school aren't quite as fancy, aren't quite as nice. So I remember as an undergraduate student, I got my undergrad degree here at ISU. And if you sat at a desk that, had a broken piece on the desk and you reported it, it might be broken tomorrow and next week and maybe even next semester it's still broken. But at Creighton, that's not really the case. Private schools, if you report that your desk is broken, then it'll either be fixed or replaced by this afternoon. And it's just a little fancier. And as such, it costs a lot of money to go to private school. So, but through the IDEP program, it costs our students much less to go to school through at Creighton. So great facility, awesome. Omaha's a beautiful place. Honestly, when I went to Creighton through the IDEP program myself, so I'm an IDEP graduate from 2001, and I went to dental school at Creighton because of the IDEP program, and in spite of the fact originally that it was in Omaha, Nebraska. I thought, oh boy, it's in Omaha. I don't know if I really want to. We loved our time there. It was great. Beautiful. It's a great city. And we really enjoyed our time there. So I'm glad that that's where I went to school, and I'm glad that I got to live there for a few years. What are the requirements? Just like anywhere else, you guys all know everybody pretty familiar with the prereqs, your year of biology, year of general chemistry, year of organic chemistry, year of physics, and then all the other goodies that you need to graduate. We do expect students to have a bachelor's degree by the time they start the program. So you obviously don't have to have the bachelor's degree by the time you apply, but by the time you'd start, we do expect that you have a bachelor's degree. Even though it's not a 100% requirement, you'd be hard pressed and almost impossible to get in if you don't have that bachelor's degree by the time that you'd start your classes with IDEP. So lots of things that you're going to need. All of you, is everyone familiar with the application process for dental school in general? The ADSAS application. Does anyone need any questions answered about just the application process in general?
And a shameless plug. We will have our application workshop on Monday at 5 to 6:30 over in Norco 117 or online. And you are more than welcome to participate and listen. And I give you the full aerial view of what ASDAS looks like for the application process. So attend that. That's just a shameless plug. Sorry, Dr. Ybarguren.
No, don't be sorry. It's great. You're perfect. I guess after you guys introduce yourself to me, I was going to introduce myself to you other than just starting, and I kind of forgot to do that. But so let me just tell you a little bit about my background. I've kind of alluded to it. I graduated from Idaho State. I went through dental school at Creighton through the IDEP program. I started dental school in 1997, graduated in 2001. So I guess 97. And I came back to Idaho. I have a full-time private practice in Idaho Falls. I went into group practice when I first graduated and was a partner in a group practice for about almost 6 years. And then I left that group practice and just went out on my own. So I have a solo private practice in Idaho Falls. I see patients about 4 days a week in my private practice. So I have, essentially full-time. I take Tuesdays off, and so in about 2003 or 4, Dr. Frederickson, who used to direct the program, asked if and he was the one that taught me in dental school and accepted me to dental school, asked if I'd come and teach a class to the IDEP students. And I reluctantly consented to do so. And I didn't realize how much I would enjoy teaching and how much I would enjoy rubbing shoulders with exceptional students. And at the time, I wasn't much older than them. Then Dr. Frederickson went and became the dean at Creighton's dental school at the time and asked if I would take his position at directing the program. And I told them no. And a few short months later, I was directing the program. And so I love what I do. I enjoy it. So I enjoy the mix of owning my own private practice and being able to provide treatment for my patients, as well as doing what I do here with IDEP. My wife and I have been married for 28 years. We have 3 children, all of whom are in college now. I have a junior in college who's a finance major. I have a daughter who's 21, and she's got 1 more year in dental hygiene school. And then our youngest is going to be 19 in a couple of weeks, and she's just applying to an RN program. So, so my wife and I are kind of trying to figure out what life's like without having kids at home. This summer, I think we'll have a pile of kids home, so that'll be good though. So like, I think the bulk of them will probably be home for the summer, so that'll be fun for us. So I directed the IDEP program since about 2005, I believe. And I love what I get to do through the IDEP program because of my interaction with the brightest young minds. I really feel that way. And the faculty and people that I get to rub shoulders with here that work with us. And so in helping educate the residents and the IDEP students. So it's a little bit about me. And I'm an open book. So if you have any questions at any time about that, I'm happy to share. But I think it does make it a little unique because I direct the program, but I went through it as well. So I know what it's like to be an IDEP student. And we can talk about that here shortly as well. So what do you need to do, right, when you're going to apply? Really within the application, you're going to have grades, DAT scores, your letters of recommendation, your shadowing hours, your personal statement, or your the essay that you write about why you want to do what you want to do. And you kind of compile all those things together in your ADSAS application. And so as you go through and do that, we'll come back to this in just a second, but then you're going to complete your IDEP, your ADSAS application. So if you complete your ADSAS application and you list your state of residency as Idaho, then we will get your application. So Creighton gets that. If you apply to Creighton as an Idaho resident, then Creighton gets your application. They'll immediately forward it to us. If you call Creighton and you say, hey, what's going on with my application? What's my status? They will say, call the IDEP program. So it used to be years ago when I was in school, about the years ahead of me, there would always be a handful of Idaho residents that got into Creighton that weren't through the IDEP program. So they just got into Creighton directly, not through IDEP. They really don't do that anymore. Like right now, the only Idaho residents that are accepted to Creighton went through the IDEP program. And that didn't used to be the case, but that's kind of how it is now. So, so once we get your application, every school, let me ask you guys, what do you think are some of the most important things that any admissions committee at any dental school is going to look at on your application? What are the first things they're going to look at?
Your DAT score.
Your DAT score. Yep. What else?
GPA.
GPA. What else?
Your volunteer hours or extracurriculars that you did.
So really, and this is true of any dental school, your DAT, your GPA, those two things, first and foremost, are going to be like a deal breaker on whether or not you make it to the next phase of having your application reviewed, no matter where you apply. Easier or harder to get into dental school as an Idaho resident than a resident of some other state?
Harder
Why?
because we're not like prioritized as much in other
Yeah.
states.
You are not prioritized, so it's way harder. So I kind of passed over this quickly. I'm assuming that you guys all have access to this, or you can through the college, or you've seen this publication. So what's the challenge of using this publication to look at things regarding, like average GPA of matriculated students, for example, of many dental schools? How is that skewed for an Idaho resident? Any ideas?
Your GPA has to be higher. It's got to be greater. You already got to stand out
Got to be greater than what? Than whose?
than the average, than the
Yeah,
in-state student,
yeah.
than the in-state student.
So absolutely. So when you apply to an in-state school, if you apply to a school it's an in-state school like University of Louisville or University of Kentucky or Colorado or University of Utah, any of those schools that are state-funded schools, not private schools, they buy, just like the IDEP program has 8 students every year that the legislature says we have 8 students that we send to Creighton. They have a set number of spots in their dental school that are specifically reserved for those students, for their state students. So if you apply so here's a good example. The state of Kentucky has 2 state dental schools, the University of Kentucky and the University of Louisville. They're both state supported, both state funded. So that means there's a set number, a large number of the spots of both of those dental schools are reserved specifically for Kentucky residents. So when I was applying to dental school, I applied to the University of Louisville and I got an interview, and I went to the interview, and there was a handful of us from out of state and there was a pile from in-state. And we hung out for the day. Probably 80% of the in-state students, the Kentucky residents that were interviewing at Louisville, about 80% of them had not even taken the DAT yet. And they were getting an interview. Does that sound odd to anybody?
Yes.
Yeah. So what if you're from Idaho and you haven't taken the DAT yet, and you send in your application and you're like, I'll take it in like December. How many interviews do you think you'll get?
None.
0. I'd bet big money you'll get 0 interviews. And the reason being, so what's my point? It's way easier for someone to get into a state school when you're from that state just by sheer numbers. If there's 150 students in Kentucky, and I don't know if these numbers are accurate, but whatever the number is, if there's 150 spots, or 100 spots saved for Kentucky residents between those 2 schools, they might have 200 applicants. So they have a 1 in 2 chance of getting in. So when you look at their grades and their DAT scores, they're going to be lower than the average matriculated score is going to be lower than what would be necessary for an Idaho resident to get in with a high probability, right? So your chances are only going to be better if you have high grades and DAT scores. So grades need to be high, DAT scores need to be high, and that's the first level. So what if your grades and DAT scores aren't awesome?
When you say high for grades and GPA wise and for the score, what do you mean by that? What number?
Well, I can give you some stuff for IDEP, and then that can be, so if we go here in 2020, of all the applicants, so everyone who applied, so if you averaged every applicant that applied, the average GPA was 367, and these are the average DAT scores in those categories. The average that got accepted, 384, 23, 22, 23. So I would say 3.5 and better, and near close to 20 or above. And it doesn't mean that has to be that way across the board, but and the downside, why? Because you're just competing with a huge number of students. So if you're competing, if you're trying to go to I know this is about IDEP, but I also think I should share with you about the application process in general. If you apply to Louisville, they might have 15, I don't know, 10 to 15 spots for out-of-state students. And I should look it up in the publication. I didn't before today, but let's say there's 15 people they accept that are out-of-state students, and they're accepting that out of an application pool of maybe 2,000 students that applied. And the same 2,000 students that applied to every other, out-of-state school, or many other out-of-state schools too. So you're competing for 1 out of 20 spots with 2,000 people versus competing for 100 spots out of 200 people. So the bottom line is it's more competitive to get in when you're from a state like Idaho that doesn't have, we only have 8 spots. Louisville Kentucky probably has 100 to 150 spots. So it's much different. So your grades and your DAT scores are the first thing. And what if someone has for us, how does this happen? Like we will just take, that's the first level of getting to the next round, so to speak. So we'll get everybody's application, and we put it in a spreadsheet, and we look at 3 things: grades, DAT scores, and shadowing hours. And we kind of put that into a spreadsheet, and then we'll rank it from top to bottom, and we'll say, oh, there's kind of a breaking point at about there. And then we will usually invite anywhere between 15 and 30 applicants every year to interview with us. So we just take the top 15 to 30 applicants each year, and we'll invite them to interview. So when we look at that, now all of a sudden you make it to that next tier. So you go, okay, so now what comes to play? Well, your interview is a big part of it, huge part of it. Your all your extracurriculars, your personal statement, your letters of rec, all those things. What if someone has what if someone has quite low GPA and DAT scores, but they've got outstanding extracurriculars and awesome letters of recommendation and a great personal statement? What do you think happens to that student? What's their likelihood of getting in?
It sounds like it's low if you're basing it off of the spreadsheet with just GPA, DAT, and volunteering.
Yeah. So Erin, are you still right here?
Yep.
Awesome. Sorry, and you do your thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to. So tell me, from all the
You're fine.
From all the other schools that come and talk to you guys, is that different? Is what I'm saying different than any other school says?
Well, I would say that, like with private institutions, they're not going to have a residency issue question mark or consideration. And Creighton itself, not for the 8 seats for the IDEP program, they're probably going to look at things a little bit differently too, because they're a private institution. So chances are a little bit better for those schools that are private, because they're not looking at just your in-state versus out-of-state. But for dental, unfortunately, with other schools, that those percentages are much, much lower for students to get accepted. And so that is where it becomes a difficulty. So that's why this program is special for me in that kind of thought process. But GPAs can be high. And certainly the DAT scores play into it a lot with those state schools. And students need to be smart. You need to apply to schools that accept more out of state than in state, or a better number, so that your chances are greater. But we did have, just this last year, we had 2 students from Idaho get into the University of Washington. And we have a good contingent that get into the University of Utah as well. But that said, we've had, not this last year, I don't think we have an IDEP student, do we, Dr. Ybarguren?
Let me think. I know you do this upcoming year.
Boise State.
I don't know that we have anybody from Boise State this year.
Right, but the year before,
normally do.
So, but yeah,
we do coming up. We have a couple that will start with us in August.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes. So the thing is, and as I share this stuff, I want this to be helpful. And sometimes when we talk about this, I think some students maybe get a little frustrated that like, well, that seems kind of bleak, but it's just a matter of sheer numbers. We'll take everybody's going to look at what are their top options, right? What are the top options for people to take? So the tough part is if you apply to Louisville or any school, you apply and your grades and DAT scores are quite low. This is going to sound harsh, but it's just reality. Do you think they read your personal statement? Because they didn't meet our minimums for us to invite to an interview. So why would we read their personal statement and look at the fact that they've done lots of other things, right? So unfortunately, like grades and DAT scores are the first thing. Okay, so then once we go into the next stuff, then we say, okay, we invite people to interview. Every letter of rec is read. The whole application is looked at as a whole. And then when anybody gets an interview, it's more of an even playing field. So if you have a 3.4 and you get an interview, you might get in and the 4.0 might not, right? Because then it's on factors that aren't just about grades and DAT scores. And so then what are we looking for then? We're looking for those things that are most like the people, the situation. You go, who do we really want to be here? Who do we want to hang out with for the next year? Who's going to be an outstanding classmate? Who's going to be an outstanding team member in our program with a small group size of only 8 students? And I think that's what every dental school is looking for, right? More the individual so someone could have a 4.0 and not get in, and someone could have a lesser GPA and get in, and DAT scores and all those things as well. But you kind of need to be in that, at least in that top tier, in order to be granted an interview. One of the things that Aaron hit on is private schools. So private schools are going to have, in general, their matriculated scores sometimes might be a little bit lower. Well, let me say it this way. The more expensive the school, the higher or lower matriculated GPA and DAT scores there would be. And why? Any thoughts? So a school that costs $80,000 to go to versus a school that costs $40,000 to go to, which one is going to have which one's going to be harder to get into in terms of
the $40,000 one?
Why is that?
Because it's cheaper.
It's cheaper. So why then does the matriculated, the accepted GPA and DAT scores of those schools generally lower?
That's interesting. I would probably relate it back to the quality level of education that you can get. At a more expensive school, you probably have access to better programs, better residency things, better equipment, just a more top tier program, even though it is more expensive. More people want to go there over the cheaper school. Because at the end of the day, dental schools were expensive regardless. So if you can go to a top tier program, why not go?
I would say the reason I think that the GPA and the DAT scores are higher at the cheaper school is because it becomes more competitive, in a sense that there's more applications, and so the pool goes bigger so that they have more criteria to look at, and that's why. Whereas a private institution, they will bring in more students from all different areas and they're more expensive, so they may not have as many applications, and so it can dilute, or they have more freedom to look at more options and not just hold everybody to that higher grade. That would be the reason I think it is. What do you think, Dr. Ybarguren? Why do you think it is?
Well, absolutely. So really what happens, and so a couple things. So Cassidy, one of the things, just because a school is more expensive, this is just truth, doesn't mean it's a higher quality school. So with that, you want to make sure that you're just prepared for that. It could be, but that doesn't mean that it's that way across the board. But why, the real deal with why more expensive schools have a lower matriculated GPA and DAT score is because the more expensive school doesn't get their first choice, and sometimes they don't get their second choice, and sometimes they don't get their third choice. And the reason being is because all of you might apply, you might apply to 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 schools or whatever, and you might get into 4 or 5. And so, and if you're an extremely competitive applicant with good grades and good DAT scores and good experiences, and you're a top tier applicant, you're going to get accepted to 5 schools. And then you're going to say, well, I got accepted to 5 schools. Which ones am I not going to go to? Well, I'm not going to go to that one because it's 120 grand a year by the time we do it. I'm not going to go to that one because it's 80 grand. And I'm going to go to that one because it's in a cool place. They have a great program and it's a little bit more affordable for me to go there. So then the most expensive schools send out their acceptances, and a good percentage of those students that they accept, their first round don't accept them. They say, nope, I'm going somewhere else. And so they send out another acceptance. And then, so they have to move down their rung on who they really want to find the student that comes there, because, and it's not that they don't have a great school. They might have a fantastic school. An example, I mean, they probably should pay me because I promote them all the time, but Midwestern in Arizona is a great school. It's a fantastic school. It's very similar to Creighton in its design and its intent and its structure, and yet it's like 100+ grand a year to go there. So they don't always get it's. I mean, it's more expensive. So if you get in there and you get into UT San Antonio, and you can go there for 30,000, then most people are going to be like, I'm going to go to UT San Antonio for 30,000 instead of Midwestern for 130. So what does that mean? What can we learn from that? If you're an applicant that doesn't have this off the charts, you don't have like super high grades and DAT scores, but you're a great applicant, then you want to make sure that you also, and you say, I don't care how much it costs, I want to go to dental school, make sure you apply to some schools that are private schools that are more expensive. And why? Because you have a better chance of getting into those schools because of just the sheer numbers and what we talked about. So any questions along those lines? Does anybody have any questions about that at all? Okay. So once you apply, then we do go through the application process. We do the interviews here. Then we submit to Creighton the 8 students that we'd like to accept. They sign off on those, and then we submit those, and then we select our 8 students. So then the students that are accepted, they start here with us in the fall, like at the end of the summer of the next year. And there's 1 year in our program here. What's the year like here? It's analogous to anywhere else in terms of to dental school, other than what are some advantages? Well, small class size. So there's 8 students and us. Just before I came in here, the 8 students, we met with a practice broker. We were having a meeting with a practice broker and someone who is very familiar with all the aspects of the business side of dentistry. And he was helping the students understand about dental service organizations or the corporate side of dentistry and what to look for, just so that they're aware of what's out there. And so there's 8 students, so we can do some fun things like that. We will go to, it's a class that I teach, they'll go to probably 8 to 10 dentists or dental offices of different sizes, different types, different specialties, different structures, public health, large group practices, orthodontist, an endodontist, I mean, lots of different things. And they get a chance to talk to, and most of those people that they talk with that we bring in or go to their offices are past IDEP students, so they're IDEP graduates, and they get a chance to ask them all sorts of questions and learn things that they wouldn't have been able to learn otherwise. So you're not going to get much of those type of experiences anywhere else, because why? It's just a class size that's too big, and it seems like it's kind of like more challenging to do those things. So as such, those are just things that we need to kind of, that we can do with a small class size. So in many of their classes, most of their dental specific classes, it's very small, just the 8 of the IDEP students and the instructor. private practicing dentists from the area, most of which are IDEP graduates, will come in, like Dr. Lee Reddish teaches them dental materials on Friday. And so I would say during that first year, it's much more laid back. It's much more collegial, meaning, you know, that there's 8 students and the teacher, and they become, I mean, our friends and we're their friends. We were planning some stuff for the end of the year, and as part of that, they'll come to my home for a little barbecue at the end of the year, and they're like, oh, we need to plan that around the barbecue that Dr. Reddish is having for us. And so they kind of get spoiled a little bit, and that's okay. That's good. I think it's great. So there's huge cost advantages, and we can talk about that, and then an excellent track record. So it works out great, in my opinion. There are some challenges to that, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So if we look at costs, here's this year. So the current year, IDEP students pay $32,101. For next year, this goes up with inflation to about $32,900 and something, $942, I believe. Creighton's tuition this year is just shy of $70,000. So the IDEP students get a 54% savings over 4 years. So every year this number goes up a little bit as this number goes up a little bit. So this goes to about 72 for next year, and this goes up to about 33. But all together, that scholarship is in effect. Once an IDEP student gets accepted, that student gets a scholarship for all 4 years, not just the year that they're here in ISU. There is no requirement for students to return to Idaho to practice. So, and yet 70% or so of our students will actually come back to Idaho and practice. And I don't think that's going to change. That's going to always, I think, stay high, because as you all know, Idaho's a great place to live. And used to be sometimes challenging to come right back as a dentist, because there were really kind of a surplus of dentists in the metropolitan areas in, you know, Boise Valley, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, Twin Falls. You know, those areas were kind of saturated with dentists. There's so many people moving in right now from out of state, you know, getting out of certain areas, you know, of the country that they'd rather not live now with certain situations. And so there's so many people moving to Idaho that I can't foresee that it's a great time to be a dentist in Idaho, and there'll be a great time for graduates in the next number of years to move back to Idaho and find great opportunities in taking care of patients. So that's kind of the cost savings. IDEP graduates, in terms of their debt upon graduation, you say, you know, national averages 300 plus. IDEP average is about 221. I can tell you for this year, I just looked at this today, of our students that graduated this year, there's an average of 233,513. So that's the IDEP students' student loan debt is still about 233. And the low was 106 and the high was 265. So the IDEP students sometimes have a little bit higher debt than you would see in maybe some other situations, because many, not all, but many students are, you know, some students may be married and have children, and so the costs for them to living expenses and things of that nature may be higher. If you're a single student and you know, and things of that nature, you might be able to get that down less than that. So anyway, so, you know, there is some cost savings, and honestly, that's a huge thing. What's the biggest upside to having a decreased cost of your dental education? Well, how will that impact you in the future most quickly?
You can jump into practice.
Yeah, jump into practice. So you go,
It's easier for you to get even sign contracts, because you can be a little bit more, you have more freedom with your money and your finances because you're not in as much debt. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. It leaves more doors open to you by far. And so that makes things really awesome. So for sure. So if someone tells you, oh, it's not a big deal that someone has, like, you know, $400,000 or $500,000 worth of student loan debt when they get out of dental school, it's okay. It's expensive to be a dentist anyway. Yes, but it is a big deal. Your situation will be limited as you get out, and your opportunities will be less because of that level of debt. And you'll have to be more selective because you're going to have to make a lot of money to service that debt. So can be a challenge. So there's definitely a benefit to having lesser debt. If we look at all this stuff talks about is the track record of IDEP. So, and really all this shows as we go through is Creighton versus the national average. And these are just some, so failure rate. So what's the national average failure rate of first time? What 11% in that year of all the people that took it failed? 1.2% of Creighton grads failed on their first time. So the pass rate was 98.8% there versus 89% of the national average. So that just shows Creighton does a better job than the national average in terms of first-time pass rate on boards. That's kind of what this is as well. And then clinical board rate. I can say that in the history of the IDEP program, since 1980, hundreds of people who've gone through the IDEP program, I think there's been one student in all the years who didn't pass National Boards Part 1 on the first time. And I think everyone has passed National Boards Part 2 and their clinical board exams right off the bat. So IDEP average would be virtually 0 every year except one. So Creighton does a great job. IDEP does a great job. These are national boards in terms of clinical board exams. And you can look here, 86, 81 versus 93, 96, 95. I mean, all high 90s. So Creighton does a great job of preparing students to do well on their written exams as well as their clinical board exams. So that's a great thing. And that's definitely true. Let's see. So here's the other thing that's interesting, what happens. So if we said, how do IDEP students perform once they get to Creighton? Okay, so these are the years that we have listed here. And this is the number. We have 8 students in the IDEP program. So of those 8, how many of those 8 students graduated in the top 10 of the class? 4, 4, 5, 2, 6, 3, 4, or whatever, right? In the top 20 of the class and the top half of the class. So what does this say? Like out of 85 to 115 students in the top 10, generally about half of the IDEP students graduate in the top 10 of the class. So 4 of the 8 graduate in the top 10. In 2020, 4 right here, these 4 of those students graduated in the top 5. So we had IDEP students were number 1, 2, 3, and 5 in the class at Creighton. So out of, at that point in time, it was, I can't remember if that was out of 85 or 115. Might have been out of 115. But anyway, so why is that? Why do you think IDEP students do so awesome? Like, why do they do so awesome when they get to Creighton?
It's that first year of getting spoiled.
First year getting spoiled?
That first year, and it just makes them accelerate just so much better than everybody else.
It's also harder to get accepted. So you're getting these top of the line students coming in.
Yep. So I would say both of those things are true. And I would love to sit here and say, oh, it's because of me and the other people that teach in the program that they all do so awesome. That's not true. I'd love to take credit. It's not true. I can't take credit. So why are they that way? One, just as Wyatt said, we have a high quality student because it's competitive to get into, right? So we have a high quality student to begin with. Number 2, the small class size makes all the difference, really. As part of that, if you're one of 8, it's just human nature. Nobody wants to be the last, right? So everybody just performs well. If you come out of a test, and most of the time the students are all good friends and they might study together and they hang out and there's only 8 of them. They get to know each other really well and they're usually really good friends. So they might share with each other how they did on a test. And if you come out of a test and you're like, crap, I got a 93 and I was the lowest one at the bunch, right? Then you kind of go, nobody wants to be the last. And so as such, it's just human nature. Everybody works hard and they help each other and they all do well. That's just, if you're running a race and there's 8 people in the race and there's 3 elite runners in the race, you're probably going to run that race, even if you're not an elite runner like me. I'd probably run that race faster than if I was with one of 115 and there's 10 elite runners in there and I'm in the middle of the pack. I think I'm doing awesome, right? But I'm like, I'm doing great. So it's not, does it matter? So when does it matter how well you do in dental school? Why does any of this matter? IDEP top 10, top 10 in the class at Creighton. Why does that matter, or does it?
If you want to do residency, you need to be the top of your class.
Yeah.
It's just the expectation if you want to do any sort of specialization.
Yeah. So I'd say if you want to be, I heard from a couple of you, want to do oral surgery, or I'd like to do or endodontics. So oral surgery, endo, and ortho. If you want to do those, you got to be high in your class. So it's just like now all of a sudden to get into a residency is kind of like getting into dental school. You got to compete for those spots again. And what are they going to look at? They're going to look at your class rank more so than they even look at your GPA, right? Because you might go to a school that says, well, nobody at this school graduates with a 4.0. Like, you go, it's harder to get A's in that school. And so the number one student might have a 3.8 or a 3.9. And yet at another school, there might be 3 4.0s. And so you go, they don't really look at your grade, your GPA, as much as they look at your class rank. Where did you rank among your peers? And then they look at other exams. It used to be they looked at board scores, but most now board scores are just pass fail. So, which is a challenge, in my opinion, for those who want to specialize. But bottom line, why is that important? I can assure you, I graduated higher in my class because I was an IDEP student and because I kind of got off on the right foot with just nobody wants to be the last. So everybody works hard, everybody does well. And so when you get to Creighton, you're used to doing well, you're used to expecting a lot out of yourself. Most IDEP students don't go into dental school trying to be like, well, C equals DDS, right? Or the old jokes of, what do you call the guy that graduates first in their medical school class? Doctor. What do you call the person who graduated last in their medical school class? Doctor. Truth. But usually our IDEP students aren't of that mindset, and they aren't because they just, and to each his own, that's up to them. If we look at this, however, you'll look and see that, it was only happened 3 times in this thing, but there were 3 students who didn't graduate in the top half of the class. So graduated in the bottom half of the class. So it's not a requirement or expectation, but I do think if someone like has a desire to specialize, then this can be a great opportunity for people to get, hit the ground running. So any questions about that at all? Okay. Here's some of our students. Some of you might know some of these people. Every year it's a little bit different. Some of these guys, talk about specializing. He's an orthodontist. I think he's the only one that specialized that year. Orthodontist, oral surgeon now. They don't look, you're like, wow, look at these guys. They're like messing around. Janica is a general dentist in Denver. General dentist in Montana, general dentist in Idaho Falls. Brittany is an endodontist in North Idaho, Brittany Penberthy. Tyler's an orthodontist in Pocatello here. Forrest teaches at an AEGD residency at the VA in Salt Lake. Devin he's in Colorado as a general dentist, and Devin he works in a group practice in Omaha, and he does all the high-end stuff. He does bone grafts, he does implants, he does full arch implant supported prosthesis. The other 3 or 4 dentists that he works with graduated from the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and basically they send him all the big stuff, and that's what he does every day, all day. And they do the bread and butter dentistry. And so he teaches now for sedation consulting. So he does IV sedation and teaches for a group that teaches IV sedation. So all great people do an awesome job. This was a couple years ago. This was 2018. Brent's in Idaho Falls, did our residency here after he graduated. He's in Boise as a general dentist. Stuart is in North Carolina as a pediatric dentist. Nyla is in Boise as a general dentist. Taylor is in a residency right now as well. Stewart is in an oral surgery residency. He'll finish up this year at the University of Washington. Austin is a dental anesthesiologist and works, lives in this area and travels all over the country doing that. And Dallin is an endodontist in Boise now. So anyway, fun people, cool stuff. I could go through the same thing with these guys. If any of you might know some of these people, you can say hey, and I'll share with you where they're at and what they're doing. But Jordan's oral surgery residency right now in Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee. Pediatric dentist. She did, both of these ladies did AEGD residencies, and they're in general practice. He's an orthodontist, a general dentist in Pocatello, general dentist in North Idaho. So all great people doing cool stuff. Cool. Let me come back to some of this other stuff. Okay, how the first year works. It's very analogous, like we said earlier. It's basically a analogous year to anything else except you're one of 8 instead of one of 115 or 40 or 50 or whatever it is in the dental school class, wherever you might go. At Creighton, it's 115. So what's the biggest question we get all the time? What's the transition like, right? So all of a sudden you go from one of 8 to now all of a sudden being one of 115. I believe it was Cassidy that asked, what's it like at Creighton? Is there other programs like IDEP at Creighton? There used to be. So the University of Utah, before they started their own dental school, they used to have a program that was almost exactly like the IDEP program for 10 students going to the University of Utah. And so it was very similar. And so when I was a student and we went to Omaha for that, to start that second year, at my time, there were 7 IDEP students, not 8. So we had 1 less IDEP seat, but there were 7 of us and 10 from Utah. So 17 out of 85 were not at Creighton for the first year. And then we went and joined the rest of our class for years 2 through 4. Now, the University of Utah doesn't do that because they have their own dental school. And there are some other state-funded programs, but none of which have a decentralized first year. So for example, Wyoming has a program with Creighton where they send a couple students, but they go directly to Creighton. They don't do anything in Wyoming for that first year. So there are some other programs, but Idaho is the only one that has a decentralized first year. As such, you can imagine there's kind of some little bit of challenges that go with that, right? Like you guys all get tight knit here, and there's 107 or so out there that all get to know each other and everything. And then you come and join them at the end of your, to start the second year. And I would say, how does that transition go? It depends on the 8 individuals that go and with how that transition goes. And I would say, if people go to Creighton with the mindset of assimilating and becoming a part of the Creighton class and becoming an asset to that class and getting to know your classmates and help them and do all those things, the transition goes awesome. If students are kind of like, oh man, I kind of miss it back at IDEP when Dr. Reddish would bring us in donuts every Friday morning and we'd get to go to lunch, on some of our teachers or what, on their dime or whatever. And you kind of go, nobody does that at Creighton. Well, they don't, because there's 115 students, right? So like the teacher probably doesn't bring in donuts for the whole class, but at IDEP we kind of do. So those students out there don't want to hear about that, right? Oh yeah, Idaho is so awesome, or you met whatever, it's like, and when I say that, I make it sound like the students just think Idaho, like IDEP is so awesome. There's times when I'm sure the students in their first year are like, wow, this kind of sucks. There's a lot required of me, that it's busy. It's more intense than I thought it was going to be. And so I wouldn't say that they're always just like smiling from ear to ear because they're in Pocatello at dental school. It's still dental school. But the transition goes pretty well, actually, depending upon how the student manages it. I was talking to Kasten Libert, is one of our 4th year students at Creighton. And I talked to him on the phone this morning. He called me to ask and talk about a few things. So he graduates here in a couple weeks, and he is going to do our residency here in Pocatello. So he's coming back to Pocatello to do an AEGD. And I just asked him, I'm like, how is it? How was, like, how is it now? And how was it when you first started, when you transitioned to Creighton 3 years ago? And he said, honestly, he's like, now we don't even think about it. Like, we're just like, and nor does anybody else in the class. We're just part of Creighton's dental school, and they like us and we like them. And like, you don't even think that, oh, we weren't there the first year. But he's like, at first it was a little bit of a challenge because, there were different, friend groups and different things. But over time, he's like, we meshed and integrated, and it was awesome. So, so any questions about that, about how things work, and ask anything, how things work during the first year, or how the transition is, or what Creighton's like, any questions at all?
When you mention residency programs, so how it works is you graduate, it's the first, you take your second year boards that second year, and then you take the other test. What is it, year 3? What is that?
Usually the second part boards. So now it's all kind of changed. Most schools are going to what's called integrative boards.
Yeah.
So instead of having boards part 1 and part 2, they're changing just to one written board. And that will usually
That's
be
year
in the
4 or
it's either 3rd or 4th year.
Yeah.
So because boards are pass fail now, it didn't used to be that way. I think it's lame that they're pass fail. It really is a hindrance to those students who want to specialize. But since boards are pass fail, most residency programs will then require like you to take a different test that's going to be scored in addition to boards for your application to residency programs. So for example, a lot of oral surgery residencies will say you need to take medical boards part 1 because it has a score. So the only reason you'd have to take medical boards part 1 is to apply to oral surgery school, but you also have to take dental boards, integrative boards, and pass those also. So because the dental boards don't have a score, they don't care that you just passed. They want to know what your score is. They want to know, just like your DAT. That's why the DAT is scored, so that it creates a separation among students, so you can decide who you're going to accept. So you generally would apply for specialty residencies around the end of your 3rd year and the start of your 4th year. And then you go through application cycles and they're in that application cycle and get invited to interviews, and you do all those things during your at the end of your 3rd and the start of your 4th year. Most specialty residencies go on a match system, just like medical residencies. Which, are you guys familiar with what that means or what that is? So you'll go, let's say you want to be, a couple of you said you might be interested in oral surgery. So you apply to a bunch of oral surgery programs and you go to the match. So every applicant ranks the schools that they applied to in order of which school they'd want to go to most. So their number 1 school they'd love to go to, they say 1 and 2, and they rank them in order. The schools will also rank the residency applicants that they would like to have at their residency in order. Their top person they want, they rank the 1, and so on. And it goes into a computer system and it spits out the lowest common denominator, and then you might match with a certain residency, which means you've signed on the dotted line already that says, if I match, I'm going there. So it's impossible in that setting for you to get accepted to more than one residency and get a chance to decide. So you say, well, there's 4 that I'd go to, so I'm going to rank them 1 through 4. And however the system pans out, you'll end up getting either matching with one of those or not. So if you don't match, you didn't get in. If you matched, you say, well, I really would have liked to go to Vanderbilt, but I matched at University of Nebraska. Well, that's your only choice. You go to University of Nebraska. And so anyway, that's for specialty residencies. So the same thing, they're going to invite you to come to their interview based upon lots of things. But again, it's going to go back to your grades, which is through your class rank, your score on whatever test they make you take, and then letters of rec from faculty and your experiences. If it's an oral surgery residency, then you probably did an externship at that school for a week, and you went and visited their residency and hung out with them for a week and decided, you thought, oh, this is a good fit for me. And so it's more hoops to jump through in order to specialize. Does that answer your question, Cassidy?
Yes. So then the people that are so then after you graduate and you take your boards, you can practice from there, correct? Or is it no this like other residency program that you said that the two women at the end are doing? What's that?
Okay, so if you're a general dentist, you do not have to do currently, based on how it is right now, if you're a general dentist, you do not have to do a residency program after. Many people do. So these two ladies did AEGD residency programs, which is a 1-year advanced education in general dentistry residency program. So for example, that's what we have here at ISU. And there's 4 residents in Boise, 4 here in Pocatello. But you don't have to do a residency after you graduate to be a general dentist. So if you've passed your written boards, if you've passed your clinical boards and graduated from an accredited dental school, you can apply for a license in really pretty much wherever you want to work. There's different clinical board exams based upon what state you want to apply for a license in, right? So if you want to come back to Idaho, you could take Western Regional Boards, which you could apply for a license in Idaho and like 18 other states or something. So, so it just depends. So there's different licensure exams, board exams, depending upon what state you want to apply for a license in. So just because you pass Western Regional Boards doesn't mean you couldn't go to Massachusetts and practice if that was the only clinical board exam you took. So you would take NERB, which is the Northeast Regional Board exam, if you want to go to Massachusetts to practice. So, but you don't have to do a residency after dental school to be licensed to work as a general dentist. But if people want to get more education prior to entering practice, they'll do either a GPR, which is a general practice residency, or an AEGD, which is an advanced education in general dentistry. So an example of why someone might want to do an AEGD, our residents here will all become IV sedation certified in the year that they're here. If they choose to apply for that certification, they'll get the education. If they choose to do it, then they just need to apply for the credentials to be licensed to do it. One of our residents last year here in Pocatello placed 54 implants in the time that they were a resident. So, you're probably not going to ever place, if you go at most dental schools, you won't place 1 implant as a dental student. At Creighton, you can place some. There's some dental schools where you can place some, but if someone says, I want to be a general dentist, but I want to place implants, you could do a residency like ours and be able to do those things. Each of our residents will do a full mouth reconstruction where they do restore a dilapidated bite entirely, and as opposed to doing single unit dentistry on this tooth or that tooth, they treat the whole mouth, and each one of them will do a full mouth reconstruction in the year that they're here. So those are just examples of why someone might want to do a residency program as a general dentist. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Other questions you guys have?
Dr. Ybarguren, could you share what happens to the student? Is there a chance for a student where they apply to Creighton University, if they end up not getting one of the IDEP seats, is there an opportunity for them to possibly get a regular Creighton seat?
There used to be that option years ago, like where Creighton would take a handful of Idaho students in addition to the IDEP students. Currently, they do not. So there's, of the Idaho residents that are at Creighton now in all 4 years of the programs, all of them are IDEP students. So we did have one student that I know emailed the admissions committee at Creighton and said, hey, I'd really love to go to Creighton, and even if it's not through the IDEP program. And they basically replied back to that email and said, they forwarded that email to me. They forwarded the reply. They CC'd me on the reply and basically said, you need to reach out to Jeff Ybarguren with the IDEP program. And so it was kind of like, in a way, they're kind of like, sorry. There is one exception to that I've known over the last little number of years. There was a student from Boise who went to Creighton undergrad. So they went out to Creighton and went to Creighton undergrad, and then they applied to dental school at Creighton through the ADSAS, and they were an Idaho resident. And so we got their application, and I'm like, this student's already at Creighton. So I called Dr. Norton, who's the Dean of Admissions at Creighton, and said, hey, have you seen this? He's like, yeah, he's kind of on our radar. We saw that he's an Idaho student and he's out here at Creighton. And so he was a very competitive applicant. And so at the end of the day, what really happened is between Dr. Norton and I, we just found out what the student wanted. Like, do you want to move from Omaha back to Pocatello for a year and then back to Omaha for 3 more? He's like, well, I will, if that's the way, that's the way it needs to be. But of course, I'd rather just stay out here and join up, And so there are a couple of scholarships that Creighton has just in general that are about the same cost or money savings as the IDEP program. So they did accept him at Creighton as a, not through the IDEP program. And he ended up getting a scholarship that was made it about the same as if he would have come to IDEP and come to Pocatello. But he was a Creighton undergrad student. So I think on the most part, it's not very likely. It used to be, but now it's not. So other
And then
questions?
maybe a little bit about the demographics of the class. How many, percentage of females versus males?
At Creighton or IDEP?
IDEP.
It just depends. We as you can imagine, I think Idaho, we're still a little bit behind the times. I love it when we have a little discussion like today and you go almost half the students are female, which is great. That's more like what it is across the nation. Being very direct. We don't care if you're male, female. I don't care. We don't care what religion you are. We don't care we don't care whether you like Diet Coke or Pepsi or neither. It's a matter of we accept the best students, and the vast majority of our applicants are male. And so there are times when, like in some of our classes, we've had no female students, and we've had as many as 3 in the class that are female at a time. We have accepted, a few years ago, we accepted 4 female students, and one of those 4 chose to go somewhere else. So we ended up with 3 female students in the class. So the demographic are very similar, just it kind of mirrors what the demographic is of the applicant pool. There is a regional basis for the program, and sometimes that question comes up. So the program is for the state of Idaho, not for Southern Idaho or for Boise Valley or for Southeast Idaho. So as such, we kind of separate the state into 4 regions: Southeast, Southwest, Central, and North Idaho. In general, we don't really look at that first. So we choose the top 15 to 30 to interview. Then we choose our 8 that we feel like out of those that we interviewed that we feel will be the best fit for our program. And then at that point in time, we say, okay, here's the 8 that we want for our, to accept in our first round. Then we look at those things regionally, and almost always everything. So the bulk of our applicants come from Southeast Idaho and Southwest Idaho. So Boise Valley and Idaho Falls, Pocatello region. We generally have very few Central Idaho applicants, which would be Twin Falls, Sun Valley, Burley, all the way up through into Salmon, Chalice, Stanley, Sun Valley, that area. We generally have very few applicants from that area, and a little bit fewer applicants from North Idaho as well. And so, but as such, we can, so that regional basis really isn't nobody gets in or doesn't get in based upon their region that they live in. But we do. So for example, if we don't have anybody from Central Idaho that we accept, then we need to make sure that there's not a deserving applicant that we overlooked. And so we make sure that that's the case. But so does that answer your question about demographics?
Certainly does. Thank you.
You're
Let's
welcome.
take one last question because we are at 5:30. Does anybody else have one last question for Dr. Ybarguren?
I had a question about like how many people apply. I don't know if I just missed that. My roommate just came
You're good.
home.
You're just fine. No, not at all. We've had as few as just a little over 30 and as many as 120 a year. Right now, historically, we're in the like 30 to 50 range for applicants for the 8 spots.
One more question.
Sure.
Well, all of us that are in this room, we're all COVID kids. We spent the majority of our college education during COVID. So how have you seen COVID related topics of education influence at all, like your demographic, your numbers, your scores, your GPAs, those types of things?
In all sincerity, I haven't seen it. I mean, time will tell for this year, but in the previous years, we haven't seen like much of a change in terms of the numbers. So still DAT scores and GPAs are still comparable to what they were pre-COVID, but that could always change. So I don't know. But to date, we haven't seen a change in that. I think there may be some people who maybe, I know in the medical community or nursing programs or things of that nature, you'll see fewer people applying to those programs because of COVID. I don't know that we've seen a decrease in the number in applicants or any of those things because of COVID. So, but it's always a possibility where people are like, we're probably, dentists, we're more susceptible to, acquiring any kind of disease, especially airborne diseases from our patients than anybody. We have aerosol generated out of their mouth that spews, whenever we use a high-speed handpiece. And yet me personally, am I worried about it or nervous about it? Not at all. Was I at first? Yeah. But I think, but that's always a risk. So with that, it's got to be a known risk. And I think there's probably some people, we've seen 2 things. Some people may be deterred from the profession because of COVID or their possibility of restrictions or transmission or different things related to it from a employment standpoint. In addition to that, Creighton there was a 4th year dental student that dropped out of dental school within 2 months of graduating because there was a mandate that they be vaccinated, and they chose not to be vaccinated, so they dropped out. Actually dropped out and sued the university, and I don't know that I don't think anything ever came of that, but I'm not presenting that as if I have an opinion one way or another on that, but I'm just saying like that is a factor, right? Like you might be in school, like right now, still currently our students are mandated that in order to go to Creighton, they have to be vaccinated. And so, so people that say, oh, I'm not going to get vaccinated, then you kind of go, well, maybe, I don't know that maybe there's dental schools out there that aren't mandating that, but, and maybe in the future that mandate will be lifted, but currently it's still in order.
Now, is Creighton allowed to do that, to push that mandate because it's a private institution?
So far they've been able to. Like I say, somebody dropped out and sued them, but I don't know that, that's probably, time will tell within the courts what happens there. I don't know, but they've done it up to this point. So, but I think that's probably not super uncommon.
Do you know what it is for state schools? Like, do state schools require it too?
I don't know.
So Cassidy, I think that would be a question for each individual school on what their policy is going to be in regards to that. So you would need to check with the admissions for each of the dental schools in regards to that topic, and checking to find out so you would know where you stand in regards to those requirements. Because every school is going to be different in regards to that requirement specifically, and every state's going to be different too. So, well, I want to thank everybody for their time.
have more questions, Dr. Arbergen, would it be okay if I sent them your contact information?
Absolutely. And and honestly, if anybody still has a couple questions, I'm willing to stay here for a little bit, even if anybody else wants to hop off, I'm happy to stay and answer any questions anybody has now. So even, so Aaron, if you need to go, but other students have questions right now, or if you guys have still some questions, I'm happy to send out another Zoom link and we can hop back on for a few minutes and I can answer, or you can contact me at any time.
Okay, let me turn the recording off real quick. Shannon, can you turn the recording off for me?